Hello, everyone. On behalf of Delaware Public Media and the University of Delaware Center for Political Communication, welcome to Delaware Debates 2024. I'm Tom Byrne. Delaware Debates is supported by the University of Delaware's College of Arts and Sciences and Department of Communication. This debate features the candidates in the race for Delaware governor. The Democratic Party's nominee for governor is Newcastle County Executive Matt Meyer, and the Republican candidate for governor is State Representative Mike Ramone. Welcome to you both. We really do appreciate your participation in tonight's debate. Just to go over some of the rules for you, both candidates have agreed in advance to the rules for this 90-minute debate. We'll begin with a question for each of them, and they've agreed to hold their responses to specific time limits. We'll also have some questions from Delaware Public Media's political reporter, Sarah Petrovich, and University of Delaware senior Casey Nyman, executive producer for the Student Television Network at UD. Although the candidates have agreed there will be no opening statements, you will hear closing statements from both candidates later. The candidates will answer in the order that they have determined themselves with a pre-debate coin toss. We will try to keep our questions succinct and ask candidates to answer concisely so we can get to as much as we can in tonight's debate. So we will first start with education and focus there. I will hand things off to Delaware Public Media's Sarah Petrovich for our first question, which goes first to Matt Meyer.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Meyer, an independent review of Delaware's education funding system released last year found the state should be investing anywhere from $600 million to $1 billion more in education. The analysis also indicated Delaware should get rid of its current funding structure based on the number of students and switch to a system more strongly based on student needs, providing more to schools with the highest needs. The newly created Public Education Funding Commission is currently weighing these recommendations and plans to deliver its own suggestions to the governor by next October. How would you specifically change Delaware's education funding system, if at all, and do you think more money should be invested in education?
Good evening, and thank you, Sarah. Thank you to Tom, Sarah, Casey, University of Delaware, of course, Delaware Public Media, and Delaware Debates for providing this forum. My name is Matt Meyer. I'm running for governor because I believe we need leadership that's going to create quality jobs for Delawareans. Work hard to reduce the cost of living that's crushing too many Delaware families. Work tirelessly to increase the affordability and accessibility of healthcare and housing, and also work to improve our education system. Our public education system should be world-class in Little Delaware. Now, I'm a teacher. 10 years ago, I was a 6th and 7th grade math teacher on the east side of Wilmington who'd returned from service as a diplomat in Iraq, a Delawarean who came back home. I quickly got fed up by the quality of our schools. It is the #1 issue for me as governor. In all the years of Delaware, we have never elected a public school educator as our governor. There are going to be dramatic and rapid changes to our funding system, to invest to attract and retain the highest quality educators. We're going to look at consolidating districts. We're going to look at providing choice to Delaware families in the schools they go to. And we're going to invest like never before in partnership with my Lieutenant Governor, Kyle Evans-Gay, in early childhood.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Same question to you, Mr. Ramone. Specifically on education funding, would you invest more, and how would you rework the current funding model, if at all?
Sarah, I've been following education since I first started running, which was 24 years ago. Having been elected now for the last 16 years, I am very clearly aware of many of the obstacles in education. When you have big obstacles, you have to take a global solution. I'm not quite sure that I would agree of what we need to spend on education, but I clearly agree that more money needs to get into the classroom for the children and the teachers. The teachers need to be empowered to have the resources they need to conduct a formative educational experience for the children. The children need to be placed in an environment where we more higher guarantee their successes rather than graduating them out in a grade where they're not ready for the next grade. We need to keep them and cuddle with them and keep them in an environment where they can be successful. I do not believe we allocate the amount of money we currently have in the education system. I think when you look that we're third, maybe second, whatever you want to say as far as how much we fund, and we're coming in at third or second to the last in results, I think it's really clear Delaware's not getting any value. If you actually look at capital and per state and cost of living, we're literally the worst with how much we spend for the results we get. I would truly like to see three major modifications. The first, of course, we can't just promote a child because they're supposed to go to the next grade. We have to give the children the attention and time they need to be successful. Second, we cannot continue to have teachers scared to be in classrooms, and we need to have more security. And third, we need to empower each and every school to be successful. And I think that's one of the best way for us to enhance education.
Thank you, Mr. Ramone. Back to you, follow-up, Mr. Meyer. Talking a little bit more specifically about if you'd like to invest more funding in the system and if the current unit funding structure should be restructured, as well as if the Public Education Funding Commission recommends something a little bit different than your plan, how will you work with the General Assembly to go through with what you want, or would you stick to those recommendations that they give you?
Thanks, Sarah. I'm the only candidate in this race with executive leadership. I've been running our state's largest local government for 8 years, managed over $2 billion of taxpayer money. With that, we not only reduced taxes, but we invested to create new programs like 1,000 Kids Coding, which provided low-income kids high-income skills to enter the job market of tomorrow. I think we need to act with urgency, collaboratively with our legislative partners, but with urgency. Our funding formula was written in the 1940s. It's among the oldest in the country. Think of the people who wrote that funding formula. What were those values? And that's the formula we're following. It doesn't make sense. We're going to work with urgency. I know there's a commission. I know the commission is moving forward deliberately. The Meyer administration is going to move forward urgency. And there's a basic reason why. I stood in front of students who are losing opportunity because of the failure of leadership.
Thank you. And same to you, Mr. Ramone. Specifically on if the Funding Commission recommends something different than what you see as a vision, how would you tackle that within the General Assembly and with the Commission?
Sarah, what you learn when you've run businesses for 40-something years is how to verbalize and visualize not just the problem, but a solution and a path towards. And you also realize that that path is often not straight. It's often very curved and shaky. I've been in the General Assembly for 16 years. I've listened to this issue for 4 or 5 before I got elected, and then the next 16. It's not a simple solution, but it is clear when you have brought all 19 districts, when I first got elected, the vision was to consolidate districts with Senator Peterson in a bipartisan way, and it got shut down. When you get 19 districts with all different focuses and different needs, you need to have the knowledge and the experience listening to these needs and finding a trajectory forward where you can rectify all of them. You can't do that with a 100-page plan or in a bubble. You need to do it with all the players at the table. You come in as a governor in the state of Delaware, whether you're Republican or Democrat, and you start barking what you're going to do, you're not going to be very successful. I've watched that. You need to be able to be a bipartisan and administrator or executive, who listens to everybody's ideas and knows how to incorporate problem solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Ramone. Sticking with education, but moving to student achievement for a moment, the 2024 statewide student assessment results show overwhelmingly stagnant outcomes in overall student proficiency, with English language arts proficiency remaining around 40% for grades 3 through 8 and math proficiency at 33%. While Governor Carney increased opportunity funding and approved $3 million for early literacy coaches, some have proposed more drastic changes to address these deficiencies. Under your administration, would you support some of these, such as creating a school voucher system that would subsidize the tuition cost of private or religious schools with taxpayer dollars, or tying educator salaries to student performance rates? We'll start this time with Mr. Ramone.
Thank you, Sarah. I actually believe when you watch your education system being at 9% and 7% of 2 schools right in Newcastle County 4 or 5 years ago, and you're like, my goodness, that means only 1 out of every 10 is almost at reading level, and then you watch it go down to 5 and 4, that's an embarrassment. That's a failure. That's a failure of our county, of our city, and our state for all those children in those schools, and that's 4 years of children. I absolutely believe if a child and their family only ability is to go to a failing public school, they should have the ability to go somewhere else, whether they have to get a tax voucher to offset that cost or whatever. I don't think it's everyone do whatever. I think it's very defined, and the resources would be used for those who have no other choice. That's our obligation, to allow children to go to a school that works. Second, when we started opening charter schools, we clearly made a line in the sand. If they aren't getting a certain level of accomplishment, we closed them. I've watched that. We have no mechanism to do something similar in traditional public schools. We need to create an environment where it helps us guarantee the children's success and the teacher's success. The only way you're going to fix that is by addressing the ones that need the most help. And guess what? That means the entire funding mechanisms needs to be reconfigured. It's broken. It's the most complicated in the nation, and even the funding people in the districts don't know how to read it or how it works.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ramone. Same question to you, Mr. Meyer, specifically on supporting a school voucher system, as well as tying educator salaries to student performance rates.
I think we've invested in the public schools that we have. When you have districts like Laurel that have gone to asynchronous learning, they've gone to COVID-type classrooms because of the crisis in attracting and retaining educators, we need to first look at how do we take care of the public spaces. One thing I've learned in 8 years running our state's largest local government is when you make smart investments in public institutions, people like them. They're happy. When you take someone's tax dollar and get a return for it, it's meaningful. Voucher programs are very dangerous. It's something that Trump and Betsy DeVos tried to do nationally, taking money from our public education system. All sorts of studies show what it does is it takes a school system where there are already winners and losers and increases the number of losers who are left behind in schools where they cannot learn, that are further underfunded. Furthermore, it's a right-wing attempt, a Republican attempt, to drain the public school of resources and get tax breaks for wealthy people who are already sending their kids to private school. This sort of first step towards vouchers ends up with kids going to, the $30,000, $40,000 a year private schools coming and saying, where's my voucher? That will devastate a public school system that's already struggling. We need to invest. They're incredible programs. They're incredible people. It's struggling. We can do better. And with our leadership, we're going to make the investment to make the difference.
Follow-up to you, Mr. Meyer. You have talked specifically about paying teachers, high-performing teachers in low-performing schools more, in fact, $100,000 potentially. Can you talk a little bit more about that, how you would quantify those students' success based on their student performance, or where would you find that?
Yeah, I think that there are measures available, including testing, but not exclusively limited to testing. When I was a teacher, we would say it's very hard to measure teacher performance, even school performance. But when you go to a great school, you know it's a great school. And when you go to a failing school, you know it's a failing school. When you go in a great teacher's classroom, everybody knows that's a great teacher's classroom. When you go to a failing teacher's classroom, everybody knows that's a struggling classroom. We're going to put in place mechanisms to appropriately reward and incentivize teachers, the highest quality educators, not just teachers, paraprofessionals, staff, to go to those places where we need the most. There are 17 schools as of the last testing cycle, 17 public schools in the state of Delaware with single-digit proficiency in reading and math. And in Matt Meyer and the Meyer administration, you're going to have leadership that acts with urgency. We can't address our economic issues, our healthcare issues, our housing issues, unless we first address this root cause.
Thank you. And Mr. Ramone, anything you would like to add on teacher performance?
I just think it's basic. When you're looking at Delaware being one of the second to the bottom in the amount of every tax dollar that we take from our citizens to put into education, less than 25 cents gets into the classroom. That's the lowest in the nation. If we're talking about empowerment, let's empower principals. If you're talking about local control, let's give local control to the families able to go to local community schools. If you're talking about improving and enhancing a child's ability to be successful in their educational experience, we need to make sure that we have teachers who love to teach, who get paid more than anyone else, and are rewarded for being great teachers, not feeling they have to move into administration to get a pay increase. One of the biggest things I think I get a little disappointed in politics is when people try to say what other people are saying. Never have I ever said that everybody should get a voucher. What I said, which obviously my opponent doesn't agree, is I don't believe a child should be forced to go to a failing school when less than 5% of the people are coming out of the school able to read. It's just not right.
We're going to stick with education and continue with a look at student behavior. A recent student behavior in school climate task force meeting saw DSEA, the State Teachers Union, offer a teacher survey report that showed 75% of Delaware teachers have experienced outbursts by students that have disrupted learning. Over half of those polled also have experienced chronic absenteeism, had items destroyed due to student behavior, or faced verbal threats or aggression from a student. The task force is formulating recommendations to address these and other issues, but what do you plan to prioritize to make classrooms more conducive to learning for students? We start with you, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, every child in the state should be able to go to a school where they have an excellent opportunity to get an amazing education. And every parent should know when they send their son or daughter off to a Delaware public school, they're sending them off to a safe place. It's among our most important, most urgent responsibilities in leading the state. I believe teachers are best served when they're specialists. When I trained to be a teacher, I learned the craft of education. I learned the craft of how to teach, how to compose a lesson. Students are coming in these days with what they call invisible backpacks. All these issues that you can't even see that cause all sorts of problems. We're putting the burden on the teacher. So in addition to compensation, I think another large reason why we're having such challenges retaining teachers is they're just not equipped and supported to handle the behavioral issues that come before them. We are the only local government in Newcastle County to ever invest to create wellness centers in elementary schools in our state. We need to invest in services. Schools more and more need to become like community centers. Often when there's a problem in society, the first place you see it is in a classroom, and the first person to see it very well may be a teacher. We need to make sure to equip them so that if there are needs of housing and healthcare, if there's mental health, if there are issues of violence, they have a wealth of services to support them so they can stay laser focused on teaching.
Mr. Ramone, same question to you. What would you propose to help make classrooms more conducive to learning?
I think I accept the accolades from my opponent. We were very involved in increasing the number of SROs to keep the schools safer. We were very involved in expanding the health centers to different levels of education. Working with a bipartisan Republican and Democrat House, we were able to address so many needs that were requested from the educational community in trying to make our schools better. But when you have flawed funding mechanisms that say you fall into this category, so you get this, you can fall into that category. When you have money going into a school that a principal is dictated has to go here, I got an extra amount here, but I really need this teacher over here, and you can't do the flexibility. In business, you learn to give people the ability to be successful. In politics, it seems like we keep tightening it up and straightening it up until they can't go any longer. A perfect example is 19 school districts, superintendent of education, secretary of education, each with their divisions, each with their secretaries, their offices, their vice. And then you've got their buildings that they're filled up, that we're paying for all the energy, all the electric, all the paving and whatnot. Enormous amounts of money that could be used for these children is not. I believe my job's not only to help solve the crises that we've developed over the last 32 years of one-party leadership. I think my other job is to spend taxpayers' money responsibly. We cannot keep taxing our community to death.
Before we leave education, I do want to take a moment to discuss Wilmington schools specifically. Governor Carney's Wilmington Learning Collaborative is up and running. The first new school building in the city in some 5 decades, Pritchett Academy, opened this fall. Looking ahead, the Reading Consortium is working on a redistricting plan for Wilmington schools that would take Christina School District out of Wilmington. So what I'm going to ask you, both of you is, do you support that plan from the Reading Consortium and concurrently the work of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, or do you envision taking a different approach to addressing education in Wilmington? We start with you, Mr. Ramone.
Yeah, I am not the person that's going to keep developing babysitting sessions. I don't think we have enough commissions. We got enough. People can manipulate whatever they want to get the results they want. I will be the governor that brings the people into the room that are most formative in being able to make a difference for a child's education. I believe if you can set up an environment where you don't have another Reading Consortium, guess what? Taking money out of education, because we got to pay for the Reading Consortium, or the Wilmington Learning Collaborative. Let's just solve problems. We don't need to go through 5 years. What was it, Vision 2020 when we started? Or 2000, now we're 2020, whatever vision is. And I'm not critiquing them. What I'm saying is we got 32 years of nothingness. And it's been a consistent downslide on our children's results. 32 years. Some think, oh, we might have a supermajority and we could take over the world and do things. Delaware doesn't run that way. We need balance, because balance enhances communication, and communication enhances results. What happened with these two collaboratives, trying to solve the same problem, was groups of people didn't agree, so they made another one. Is it smart to say that these children can't read in the city, but put them on a bus for an hour and whatever to go wherever, and then an hour back, and then complain that their parents don't go to the parents-teachers meetings because it's an hour away and they move them around? This is chaos. This is not a tough problem to solve if we say we have a problem and we're going to solve it.
Mr. Meyer, same question to you. Your thoughts on the plan to redistrict Wilmington and take Christina out of it, and do you believe that you would move forward with that and the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, or do you have a different vision for Wilmington schools?
The challenges of education in our state, and particularly the challenges within the city of Wilmington, are not challenges of ideas or strategy. They're challenges of execution and implementation. There's an establishment, there's an established way of doing things, a status quo that has not been changed. 10 years ago, I was a 6th and 7th grade math teacher who ran for county executive because I was pissed off. And since then, just about every day, I've been challenging the establishment to get real things done. I can't tell you the number of people, elected officials, who called me to say, don't buy a hotel and turn it into a shelter for the homeless. The Hope Center has now housed over 4,200 Delawareans. When we wanted to start 1,000 kids coding, because I believe that low-income kids should be learning high-income skills, should learn how to program computers from the youngest age. They got to make apps, not just use them. We didn't have any money. We had no resources, but I called around. We put the pieces together. We executed. To date, over 1,100 Delaware students have gone through this summer and after-school program. We're going to work on getting a district in the city of Wilmington. We're going to work on getting community schools in the city of Wilmington. We're going to work on paying teachers to have incentives and educators to stay in Wilmington schools. And we're going to get resources directly to the classroom like never before in the state's history.
Okay, we are going to move on to a new topic, and that topic is affordable housing. I will return to Delaware Public Media Sarah Petrovich, who will pick things up there with our next question, which goes to Matt Meyer. Sarah?
Thank you, Tom. During the pandemic, the state used American Rescue Plan Act funding on a pandemic emergency shelter program, which used vouchers to house thousands facing homelessness in motels over about 2 years. Are there lessons the state can take from that program and apply to its strategy for mitigating the homelessness crisis in the coming years, specifically those facing immediate homelessness or housing insecurity? Mr. Meyer, we'll go to you first.
Thank you, Sarah. I believe housing is a basic right. I believe every Delaware family, every family in America in 2024 should be able to have a shelter over their head. Now, it's easy to say, it's really hard with interest rates rising, with the shortage of housing units. It's very, very challenging. And 5 years ago, there was really a crisis of homelessness, not just here in Newcastle County, not just in Delaware, but that communities across the country saw. What we did is we acted. We stood up against an establishment that was just status quo, and we said, let's create a facility in the middle of COVID to truly give Delawareans a shot, our most vulnerable. We developed a 90-day program, and to date, as I mentioned, over 4,200 Delawareans have gone through the program. Check out The Pathway Home. We made a documentary about it that won an Emmy Award. We're proud of our accomplishments. There needs to be systems of care. There needs to be systems to prevent those who are living on the margins, who are able to barely pay their rent, from getting evicted. There need to be systems for those who are homeless, who are chronically homeless or short-term homeless, to go into facilities across the state like the Hope Center. There need to be systems so that when they leave the Hope Center, they can be successful, as over 550 families coming out of the Hope Center have been. Let me just add one more quick thing. We have a $10 million grant application into the federal government that we believe is going to eliminate functional childhood homelessness in Newcastle County. We want to do that statewide, working with schools and facilities like the Hope Center. Let's end this travesty on Delaware.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. And same question to you, Mr. Ramone, specifically on any strategies you have for mitigating the homelessness crisis, and especially those facing immediate homelessness.
Sarah, you have to go back to the core. Why do we have homelessness? And we have homelessness because we've lost opportunity. And once we lost opportunity, we ended up having despair. And once we have despair, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. What I suggest is let's actually look at the problem. The problem is we have counties We have municipalities that have created so many regulatory hurdles for builders to be able to build a community in a way that is affordable. If you're making them have all these regulatory byproducts that they have to put in a home, they will never be able to produce affordable homes, and they're only going to produce what makes money. That's the way businessmen work. So what I might suggest is, in order to incur a path towards a direction we would rather, let's talk about smart growth that we were talking about 20 years ago when I was running for county council. I ran with Chris Coons. We both spoke about it a lot. Chris did a great job. We got some best practices together. There were some really good things we digested. What happened? It was just forgotten. So now one beauty of a politician is they create the problem that then they run on to get reelected. I don't agree with that. The problem is we need to have affordable housing, and we need to create cluster home areas where people can actually live in an affordable house. Maybe there's some commercial, maybe there's some office, in an area where a builder can afford to put those affordable homes in because their secondary areas of income are coming in from other sectors.
Thank you, Mr. Ramone. Let's continue with another question about affordable housing. With rising real estate prices in Delaware, becoming a first-time homebuyer continues to remain a challenge in the first state. While the Delaware State Housing Authority has several first-time buyer support programs, last year less than 750 families used these programs to help purchase a home. These programs have limited funds and are set to expire at the end of the current administration. Do you support re-upping these programs, such as these, and would you look to other methods of supporting first-time home buyers? Mr. Ramone, you'll go first on this question.
I don't believe the government should ever be picking winners and losers. I believe we create incentives for growth and movement, but we don't underwrite winners and losers. What I believe we need to do is, if you want to enhance people buying homes, we'll put the real estate transfer tax back down to 3% rather than moving it to 4%. Well, we need it to be at 4% because we need another $800 million to spend here or another $1 million to spend there, and it just keeps going on. You need someone who runs companies, not governments. Governments need money, they raise taxes, and they take it from you. Businesses need money, and they become customer service oriented and try to do the best they can to enhance people's desires to use their companies. I want to enhance people's desires to be Delawareans, to bring fintech, to bring biotech, to bring business to Delaware that helps Delaware expand the tax base, not a bunch of Amazon $15, $20 an hour jobs where we're redoing all these warehouses next to beautiful neighborhoods, but a place where we're bringing in high-paying jobs dovetailed with our universities and our business sector to bring jobs that then will eventually eliminate homelessness.
Thank you, Mr. Ramone. Same to you, Mr. Meyer, about first-time home buyers.
Yeah, I don't think tax cuts are a solution to our crisis of affordability. I think there are Delawareans out there really struggling. The rent is too damn high. And we got to get up as leaders and get shit done. We got to do things to make sure that people out there who are really struggling can pay their rent. In Newcastle County, we partnered with Habitat for Humanity on a Pathway Home program, actually Habitat and JP Morgan Chase, to offer low-cost rentals for a period of years while someone rehabbed their credit so that they could then purchase a home. We, on average, would spend $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in Newcastle County on affordable housing. We created a $31 million fund, over 10 times larger fund for affordability than ever has been created in county history. I believe there needs to be additional investment. I believe there does need to be opportunities for first-time home buying, including possibly reducing taxes, but only for those working people who truly need it.
Absolutely. And so a follow-up to you, Mr. Ramone, first. Both of you have discussed controlling construction costs to boost affordable housing production in the state. What are some specific regulations or building code reforms you intend to change, and how will you see this through?
I have been meeting with the Business Roundtable, with many of the business sectors, in the biggest hurdles to them being able to produce housing at an affordable rate in a fast fashion. They've given 6 to 10 really good points, of which not everyone agrees, but I'm not going to spell out here because guess what? Then people get in the game and, oh, this is better for me. Matt probably knows a lot about what those who build wish to do working through the county. But in the state, our job isn't really to write up the regulatory zoning and all. Our job is to create the business cycle that goes faster. In other words, I want to build a community rather than having to go to the state and then go to the county and then go to the municipality. Why can't we have a portal in Delaware that it lets you get in and trickle all the way down. We've been talking about that for 10 years. We bought new technology, and by the time we get it in, it's already 5 years too old. You know, we need to catch up, and we need to prioritize the things that are crises. If we have crises in building affordable houses, we need to partnership with those who would best be suited to build affordable housing in a fast fashion at a fair rate of pay. The state of Delaware has partnered with Newcastle County in many development packages, whether it was the Mission of Caring, whether it was Habitat for Humanity, several in which we've enhanced their investments by significant numbers to help all of these environments, but they're not solving the problem. Those who have to solve the problem are those who have the resources and the ability to quickly address multiple housing units at affordable prices in environments that they can still be profitable.
Thank you, Mr. Ramone. Same question to you, Mr. Meyer, on specific regulations and building code reforms you intend to do in your administration.
Yeah, the Meyer administration on day one will have more experience dealing with building, inspections, code, zoning than anyone who served as governor of Delaware in my lifetime. When I started in Newcastle County in January of 2017, all we heard is that it was impossible to build anything here. There were huge projects we were losing opportunities on. We created a program within months called Jobs Now that to date has created over 13,000 jobs for Delawareans, streamlining policies, streamlining regulatory regimes so that investors who are interested in creating a lot of jobs can do so and do so quickly. We now need to do that for housing. Mr. Ramone is correct. Local jurisdictions primarily regulate that. What we're going to do at the state level is provide incentives for local jurisdictions to create regulations that incentivize affordable housing. In addition, what we're going to do, what I saw leading the county, is that when an investor comes or who wants to invest in affordable housing, you have local jurisdictions pointing to the Department of Transportation at the state, who's pointing to the DENREC, the Department of the Environment at the state, who's pointing to the fire marshal. We're going to create a single office that business people can go to, that housing developers can go to, that will streamline the process. You go to Philadelphia, 1.6 million people, there's a single government. In Delaware, 1 million people, there are 50, 60 governments. We need to make sure they're all working together, and that will be a job of the Meyer administration.
Gentlemen, your next question will come from UD student television executive producer Casey Nyman. Casey?
Thank you, Tom, and hello to you both, Mr. Meyer and Mr. Ramone. While yes, housing is a big concern for college students like myself who are about to graduate and go out into the world, there's tons of other costs that we have to think about, from bills, groceries, insurance, car payments. If we had more time, the list could go on. As governor, how would you help alleviate this transition for young people who are about to go out and start their lives in Delaware?
Mr. Meyer, you take this one first.
Yeah, it's a great question. University of Delaware has among the highest percentage of students in the country who go to a state university who then leave the state to start working. And one of the reasons why is exactly what Casey, you expressed. Housing is a key part of that. I imagine, Casey, not many of your classmates want to go back and live with mom and dad after college. So we have to make sure housing is affordable, but we also have to create effective pathways. There are those in the University of Delaware who want to start companies, who have an amazing idea. Unfortunately, those ideas and the startup of those companies is too often relegated to just the wealthiest of the wealthy. If you have a rich uncle who can help support your startup, you can get an opportunity to do it. We're going to look at the EDGE grant program and a variety of opportunities to grow small business, because while reducing cost is one issue, we also have to increase wages, and that's vitally important with students coming out of university. We're also collaborating with retailers, collaborating with restaurants to make sure that cost structures are low, doing what we can to make sure that Delaware continues to be a low-cost state.
Mr. Ramone, same question to you.
I find it intriguing that often when you have all the answers, but then you don't understand they all have expenses to them. And when you have all the answers that are all expensive to put in place, the issue then becomes is you end up with inflation, and you end up with very desperate areas where you just can't afford to do anything to live. When I was first starting my business, 20 years old, still in the University of Delaware and as a junior, I opened up a flower shop. I went to a bank. I spoke with them. I talked to the landlord. I had relationships. I spoke with people. My parents didn't have any money. I had to borrow my own money. So Mr. Leonard Quill of Wilmington Trust gave me a loan for $8,000, and I opened up the first Ramone's flower shop. Then became 7. Then we bought a wholesale, and then my entrepreneurial career took off. But the point is, those startup opportunities aren't available today. So no startup opportunities. These technology jobs, fintech, biotech, all this beautiful development we talk and all this growth in Newcastle County, most of it was at the STAR project, which is the University of Delaware, which excludes having to go through the county for the regulatory behavior. So, you know, we can talk all we want to talk, but we have to understand what we need to do. We need to simplify the path for people to be able to build a business, open a business, build a business, and grow a staff that can work that business. If we bring in fintech and biotech and we partner with the University of Delaware and we work with the counties and the state in one global environment, and rather than having an office here and an office there, we actually can use technology to communicate with each other. Together, we can solve these problems. No governor, no one person's going to solve it. It's got to be a team approach.
Thank you, Mr. Ramone. I do want to switch gears now to another major issue on the minds of many Delaware voters. That's climate change and its impacts. The North Side Beach at the Indian River Inlet has seen dune breaches twice in the past few months, causing closures on Route 1, highlighting some of Delaware's current vulnerabilities. Given this recent issue and the severe flooding seen in Wilmington 3 years ago in the wake of Hurricane Ida, how confident are you that Delaware is prepared right now for a major storm event, especially something more severe like we've seen recently with Hurricanes Helene and Milton? And are there more immediate resiliency steps the state should be taking right now? Mr. Rohn, you go first.
So I would suggest that we need to be careful when we talk about the environment. Absolutely, we have an issue. There is clearly melt and water flooding issues that are just coming and coming, and the storms are getting worse. I get all that. Science, some would say, you can argue it's scientific. Others would say it's man-made. It doesn't matter. We need to be as responsible as possible to get a net change. Mandating everybody has to buy an EV car, and now we got to build all these EVs and take them around and put them in the ground and take them back out after they break and maintain them and have people parking next to people's houses with radios blaring. A terrible nightmare. When Toyota had the answer, I got 3 of them for my family and one of our companies. They were gas-powered EVs. You get the battery concept and you get the gas. And you go from 20 miles or 18 miles to 40 or 50 miles to the gallon. There's a step. But when the government tries to get in and force feed things, it normally doesn't work. Maryland's now trying to force feed windmills that are going to affect Delawareans. We're not getting anything out of it. New Jersey came in and put a nuclear plant right next to our state. We don't get anything out of it. We need to start thinking what works for Delaware and enhance its opportunities to get done, such as the new concepts coming with the nuclear plants. There's a nuclear environment that you can build that could be done within a city or within a town, and it can maintain that whole town. You can do it in less than 5 to 10 years, not 35 years. The other one is the hub that we just passed. Now, that's a conglomerate between us, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, but I'm out of time. But those kind of initiatives, I think, are very, very valuable.
Mr. Meyer, the same question to you about immediate resiliency issues in the state, and can the state withstand a major storm like a Helene or a Milton?
I think you just asked my opponent about the challenges of resiliency in the face of these hurricanes, which are literally killing our fellow Americans because of lack of preparedness. The challenges of living in a state that on average has the lowest sea level in the country and protecting the lowest lying areas. And my opponent said a solution is to eliminate an electric vehicle mandate. Which will not save lives. We need to invest in resiliency. We need to invest in infrastructure. Climate change is real, Mr. Ramone, and we need to act with urgency. It is truly an existential crisis. The number of days that we're seeing 90-degree or higher heat across our state is higher than it's been in centuries. We need to act. We need to make sure that those less fortunate among us have safe places to go during the hardest hit storms. We need to make sure when tornadoes sweep through, we are prepared as local government. One quick story, as a kid, in my 18 years going through, up until I graduated high school and went off to college, I believe there was 1 tornado in Delaware. We've had something like 5 in Newcastle County in the last 3 years. These are devastating homes. These are devastating neighborhoods. I'm not I don't believe we can take action as Delaware governor to prevent the tornadoes and prevent the hurricanes, but we need to invest with urgency to make sure we're protecting against them.
Mr. Ramone, because he addressed you, I do want to give you a couple seconds to respond.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. I think we've done a phenomenal job of resiliency. I think you would talk to both Governor Markell and Governor Carney, and I think we've been excellent at resolving any issues we have. And if you look at our percentage versus anyone else, we're one of the best. What I did say, I don't appreciate when political practices used to change what put words in people's mouth. I clearly said, yes, there is climate change. Yes. Is it man-made 100%? I don't think so. Is it just natural 100%? I don't think so. It's a little bit of both. But we have to come with strong, big solutions, not put sandbags up or whatever. We have to use our money that when we have a void at the Indian River Inlet, we don't sit there and babysit it for 3 years and let it run over. We fix it. We had $4 billion and didn't fix that.
It's time for us to move on because, and actually we're going to talk about some of this right now because we're looking, we want to look a little bit more at long-term resiliency. A recent study commissioned by DENREC found that based on economic benefits, local and county governments should be picking up a larger percentage of the costs necessary to conduct beach renourishment projects. What long-term fixes would you propose to address things like erosion and flooding at Delaware's bay and ocean beaches? And do you think that local government should have more financial responsibility in those efforts? We'll start with you, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, I entered this career as a pissed off teacher, and I'm in part going to become governor as a pissed off local government leader. I have very little tolerance for state government and local government pointing at each other saying, you pay for it, no, you pay for it. It's in our shared interest to sit in a room as leaders and figure out how do we invest in this for our future, for our collective environmental future, to make sure this state can exist for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, but also for our immediate economic need. When the Indian River Inlet is flooding roads, a couple times a year, based on rainstorms that are bad, but it's not like 100-year storms. We need to act and act with urgency. When the beach towns, I know there's been a disagreement with the State Department of Environmental Resources about who should pay. We're going to sit down and we're going to get it. We're going to make an agreement because it's in Delaware's interest. We're going to make sure that the beaches economically are booming now. They're doing very well. We need to make sure that revenue, where it goes, we trace where it goes, and it's reinvested to keep the community sustainable. That's what we're going to do, and it's going to be unprecedented collaboration between state government and local government.
Mr. Ramone, same question to you. Looking at long-term resiliency, should local governments be paying more share?
I believe that you have to look at the problem, and the problem isn't being angry and then saying state government and local government are going to work together. The problem is problem resolution. Let's figure out what's wrong. When we have a $4 billion over 4 years of extraordinary income, and we have a failed pumping system where we already had it fixed and working well, but when it broke, we never prioritized the money being spent there. Why? Because the money doesn't really get justified being spent there until something happens, and then we can say, this happened, and now we're going to get votes. That's the problem with politics, is politicians. You know, when you are politics and you become this, and then you want to be this, and then you want to go do that, it doesn't work. When you're a public servant, and you want to be in the state of Delaware to help Delaware be a little smarter and better as it addresses business things, you become a representative. When you learn for 41 different districts what it's like to be a representative and learn the problems and the issues of those 41 districts, you then want to solve problems again. But you need to work it within a bipartisan way. We have a one-party rule. Some think that's great. We should have even more superpower and take over the world. Others feel balance in Delaware has always worked. I kind of default to the Mike Castle, Tom Carper years. That's where I grew up. It worked for me. But I'll say this. Delaware could be the most environmentally friendliest state in the nation because of our size. We currently have the highest energy costs in the nation. We could be the best if we digested a balanced initiative to go develop what I would say nuclear and hydrogen energies in areas. The President of the United States just said we're the perfect place.
We're going to conclude our conversation on climate change by heading back to UD student journalist Casey Nyman. Casey?
Yes, later this month, DENREC will be hosting a series of community engagement events to get a little insight about what changes should be made to the 2025 Climate Action Plan. If you're elected, your administration will be in charge of making these updates. What changes do you think should be made to the Climate Action Plan?
Mr. Ramone, we'll start with you this time.
For me, that's fairly simple. I think most of you heard me being the champion fighting against the EV mandate. I mean, I just cannot perceive how the government feels a secretary of a department can go and override the legislature and tell our community that they have to switch to EV cars in an extremely reduced way, even when it is the California Clean Air Car Initiative 2, and the California delayed the Clean Air Initiative 2, but we didn't. And it's just, it's preposterous. We need to go back to doing the things that will actually solve the problems. And putting a bunch of EVs in a little tiny state. Remember, Delaware is one of the smallest states in the nation. But we're geographically located from Boston to Virginia to an incredible percentage of the population. We need to take advantage of that. We need to have speed to market. We need to have efficiencies in which we're doing things. We need to have communications, and we need to work together. We don't need to be partisan. We don't need to say, oh, a couple more votes and we can control supermajorities everywhere in every statewide. People in Delaware don't want that. People in Delaware want Delawareans working together for Delaware. That's why we would go with a yellow color instead of a blue or a red. We're yellow. We're Delaware. Every problem that comes to our state needs to be solved in the best interest of the people that live in our state. Right now, we got a nuclear plant here. We may have windmills there, and we could end up with EVs forcing us to drive when no one else in the nation's doing that. And we have the highest energy costs in the nation.
Mr. Meyer, to you on updating the Climate Action Plan, what would you do?
You know, my opponent keeps saying that he's yellow, he's not red. He's actually the leader of the red in the state House. 14 years as a Republican legislator. Last year, blocking investments in schools, in roads, so that LLCs, so that companies could vote, not just people. That's as red as can be. You know what happens when you combine red and yellow? You get orange, Trump orange. Don't be deceived, Delaware. What we're talking here is about someone who wants to bring the Trump orange to Delaware. We cannot do that. You've asked him twice now about climate change. Both times his answer is, let's get rid of the EV mandate. I tend to agree. I think that electric vehicles, the individuals should have choice. As county executive, we've bought a whole lot of electric vehicles, converted almost half our fleet to electric vehicles. I don't believe that's a comprehensive solution to our climate crisis. When you talk about the 2025 Climate Action Plan, I want to see investments with urgency in resiliency to make sure communities are truly protected in a climate emergency. But I also want to see vision that recognizes the opportunity in creating a hydrogen hub, in making green jobs, in having wind energy and solar energy far into the future that can power Delaware from Delaware.
Because he addressed you again, Mr. Ramone, I do have to give you a chance to respond.
I got it. The more we're together, the more he kind of comes over. It just took him a couple times to flip from the flop. I don't want the EVs, I do. But I got him wearing yellow ties. So come on, we're getting there, right? We're definitely getting there. What I would suggest is simple. We need to stop trying to find reasons to beat each other up and to do negative things. For instance, about the corporation thing of being orange or being Trumpsters or whatever the world you want to say. I'm clearly Delaware, and here's the reality. Yes. In the House of Representatives, we did enable one more, which was the 17th municipality in our state, to digest how they want to independently do the voting within their municipality because their entire council asked 100%. This gentleman has come to me several times in Dover, and I've always voted with the county executive, him and the previous, in helping them develop their own laws. And now suddenly we should.
I don't believe companies should vote in Delaware no matter who funds my campaign.
We're going to wrap it there because we do need to move on. We need to jump to a new subject. We're kind of moving in the right direction. Government transparency and accountability. And for that, we'll have Delaware Public Media's Sarah Petrovich rejoin the conversation. Sarah?
Absolutely. So this election cycle has brought to light several deficiencies in Delaware's campaign finance law. And Attorney General Kathy Jennings says she is already working on recommendations to amend certain broad categories of the law, including creating a limit on the look-back period as to when finance reports can be amended, how long candidates should keep financial receipts, and providing more resources to the Department of Elections to effectively scrutinize financial reports. Additionally, questions have been raised about continuing to allow corporations to make campaign contributions and if Delaware should create donation limits to political action committees. How would you like to see campaign finance reporting laws changed in Delaware? And would you like to see reform when it comes to corporate and PAC spending in elections? We'll start with you, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's hard to answer this in 90 seconds. We have an extensive policy proposal on our website, mattmeyer.org, under the vision section. I believe we should do everything we can under federal law to eliminate corporate contributions and, quite frankly, the influence of big money on Delaware elections. It's been awful this election season. It is not representative of who we are as Delawareans. The PAC involvement, the unlimited monies is simply wrong. I think that we also need to work with the Attorney General to establish an election commission or improve our election commission, not only so that it has real teeth, but so that there's an actual and perceived lack of conflict. When you have an elections commissioner who appoints to the governor, I think that creates a perceived conflict when the governor is endorsing a candidate. We're going to look hard at how do we make sure we reassure all Delawareans, Democrats, Republicans, regardless of what aisle they're on, to have an election commission that is truly serving them, an electoral process that is not just serving the highest dollar individual. There are election systems and election finance and campaign finance systems that have transformed states and communities across the country. We're going to look at those models and see how we get better in Delaware.
Great, thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Ramone, specifically about campaign finance reform that you'd like to see.
I don't think any candidate should be bought and paid for. I don't think somebody should be a county exec and say, I'm not going to take developer money, and then 2 years when you're going to run for governor, you switch it to governor and you take $6 million to run a campaign. I'm sure they're going to say, oh, it was a PAC, but when you're the first person that gave the first dollar to the PAC, I'm not a liar. I'm not going to go through this. The reality is, in politics, I think you've all watched. We watched it in Washington. I hate to see it happening in Delaware, but you basically say exactly what's wrong that you do. I went through here with months listening to the Democrats go at it, and all I heard was how proud someone was of having the most money ever collected, ever. $6 million. $6 million, 2 PACs and a personal. That's staggering. That's staggering when most collect a couple hundred. That was 5 of it was just in a primary. My point is, don't say, oh, this is really important. We need to fix this because people are being bought and paid for. When we have somebody who's going to cripple our corporate structure in our state potentially, give $1 million something, that scares me. That's 30% of our income. How are we going to pay for our schools? How are we going to pay for all these wonderful ideas that we just keep raising taxes for? I believe we have to be kinder. We clearly have to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves. We got to be honest with the voters. And we need to create an environment that enhances everybody's ability to not be enticed to take money and sell your soul.
So, Ms. Meyer, do you want to give you a few
Absolutely.
seconds? Absolutely.
You know, I'm a math teacher, and his math is all wrong. We've received over 12,000 contributions. The average contribution is, I think, a little over $100. His $6 million is made up. I think he's struggling because he's not getting the support and the financial support for his campaign. So instead of raising money, he's spending a lot more time trying to make up stuff about our campaign finance. We have received a record number of contributions, most in 16 years, anyone running for office. In fact, if you're watching today, go to mattmeyer.org,
thank you,
throw in
Mr.
a few dollars.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Meyer. We're going to move on actually to a different subject, but similar. According to a study conducted by the Center for Public Integrity, Delaware ranks 48th in government transparency and accountability. Just within the past year, the state has faced issues with opioid settlement, grant procedures, instances of state employee compensation double dipping, embezzlement within the unemployment insurance fund, and general FOIA concerns with school boards and public meetings. Both of you have previously stated you have supported creating an Inspector General's office. Besides this, what other steps would you take to improve Delaware's transparency and accountability? Mr. Ramone, you go first.
Immediately, for me, it's easy. When you have one party ruling everything, basically every position in county council, the executive branch, most of these school districts, the unions that come in and get people elected are all from one party. The chaos in Dover, mainly focusing on one party. Unfortunately, you have people then making decisions over people within their own party, and political aspirations and directions and desires get in the way. How do you fix it? That's why God gave us 2 parties. You bring in balance. Delaware needs to decide whether they think we should have every single statewide seat, the governor's seat, a supermajority in the Senate, and if my opponent's last email to raise more money comes true, a supermajority in the House, all of one party, and some think that's better for Delaware. I would strongly suggest it's not, but what's even more interesting is that Comptroller General bill that you're talking of. I was one of the primes on it for 4 years in a row with a gentleman that he and I would go to town on, probably one of the most progressive people in the House of Representatives. John Kowalko and I would go to war on many bills, but this bill, we both understood the importance of the light of day getting into the General Assembly. Many people on the Democrat side never liked John very much because he was always about ethics and open government. That's scary. We need balance.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Meyer, specifically about government transparency and some policies there.
Government transparency is essential to governing. When I first ran 8 years ago, I, with a team of 3 volunteers, high school and college students, knocked on nearly 10,000 doors across Newcastle County. What we heard time and time again is that people believed that the government that I was running to work in was not transparent, was not efficient, was dishonest. So what we did when I came in with executive leadership, we immediately took action. The 2 years prior to me starting as county executive, among the 2,000 county employees, there were 25 ethics complaints. Last year, there was 1. We worked hard. I meet individually with every employee in county government in my office to explain this is how things work. If you see anyone doing anything wrong, including me, this is how you report it. I think the first step to accountability and transparency is making sure we're electing accountable and transparent leaders. One of the crony deals I found when I first was elected county executive was a $3 million investment to create a stock exchange with the Chinese, a cryptocurrency exchange in Newcastle County. It hinged on a bill being passed through the state legislature to enable that exchange, a bill that Mr. Ramone supported and voted on. But he also was an investor in this exchange. I managed to undo the whole deal, get the county money back. The first step to having ethics and transparency in government is making sure we elect ethical leaders.
I need to respond
You
to
do
the
get it. You
statement.
do it for like 15
So
seconds.
the deal that he's speaking of is something called DBOT. DBOT was a revolutionary business that was coming into Delaware that Tom Gordon, his predecessor, set up. It was brilliant. And then the county exec actually with the Philadelphia Inquirer and other bubbled it up. The bill that he's saying I voted on, every year we do a bill at the end of the year for the banking prowess to help banks stay solvent. So there's about 13 or 15 modifications. Simply this year was one of them that actually made modifications to the corporate structure that the $1,200,000 contribution to his campaign came from because the guy wants to control the governor. But my bill was a basic bill that actually gave block trading to everyone. And guess who the only entity in Delaware who had ability to do block trading before that? Was DBOT. Okay. So they're trying to say what actually made the company worth less, he's trying to insinuate it made it worth more.
We do need,
I don't want elected officials voting when they can personally profit off their votes.
We do need to move on.
We didn't profit.
We're going to head back to our UD student journalist, Casey Nyman, for another question. Casey?
Yes, well, to add on to this, beyond the question of transparency and guardrails for the spending of the opioid settlement fund, there's the question of how should this money be spent? How do you think that the funds would best be allocated to maximize their benefits?
Mr. Meyer, we start with you.
Yeah, you know, as we emerged from COVID, because of the amazing work of President Biden and our federal delegation, Senator Coons, Senator Carper, and Representative Blunt Rochester, we had unprecedented resources in counties across the country to address the needs of the community as we emerged from COVID. One thing we did that I don't know if it's been done in Delaware history, the 3 counties came together and we said we recognize that there is a crisis among those impacted by substance use disorder across our state. The state government, we didn't believe was investing the right way, so we came together as counties and we did a report of what is happening in our counties, and it includes an action plan of what needs to happen. We're going to update that action plan when I'm governor, and we're going to invest to make sure that we're getting treatment to those who need it, to make sure Narcan is available in the places it's needed with urgency, to make sure our paramedic service is expanded so response times are decreased. And it's going to be a collaboration between county and municipal governments and the state government. It's not going to be a single office in the state sort of giving out funds to those who are politically well connected.
Mr. Ramone, your response to how best to use the opioid settlement funds.
Yeah, I am a business guy. I've been it all my life. That's why our businesses have been so successful for so long, not because of whatever some people want to try to insinuate and detract from my employees that work so hard to make those businesses successful. But what I will say is very simple. The opioid income was used in some very much needed environments and some very much non-needed environments. The environments that it was needed in, it needed to be used in a way that was with leadership, not following what other states did. In the environments that it was not needed in, at least it should have been used in a way that it didn't create sustainable spending. We now have many initiatives out there that the state and the counties use that don't have sustainable income to offset the expense. I'll give a great example. I think it was interesting how well the counties work together, because I actually was in Kent County and Sussex County for the last 2 days. They don't have the same memory or remembrance of that. It's very intriguing. But what happened was, when the money came, Senator Coons was amazing. He got Delaware the highest percentage because he put a floor on with population that nobody would get below the $1 billion. And then it was only supposed to come once, it came twice, and so forth. But the county, only one county, because of the percentage of population, demanded a portion of that. Upset our governor a bit. Was supposed to be spread out amongst all in an even way. That wasn't done. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why, but it's not for me to say.
Well, we're going to move on to another topic now. Governor John Carney recently vetoed the medical aid in dying bill passed by the General Assembly. It is likely to return in the upcoming session. Will you support the version of the bill that passed this past legislative session if it does return? Mr. Ramone, we start with you.
Yeah, I absolutely understand the compassion of losing in-laws, relatives, uncles, aunts to horrible levels of cancer and to very sad levels of dementia. And I do believe any tool we can empower our doctors with to help alleviate some of that pain and drama and stress on those families is extremely important. But here's where balance matters. In our General Assembly, I and 3 other people were all very in favor of this bill, with one caveat. We did not feel it should be a prescribed pill. If the pill is going to be implemented or used, it should be given by the doctor, and the only expansion of that would be given through a hospice care, not a pill going home with mom and the brother. And there's just too much. You're talking about somebody being alive or being dead. Being compassionate in people's later years and later days of life, especially with diseases, is something hospice care does very well. And I would also mention most people's doctors are the smartest, best people to render that care. We only asked for that one amendment, and they wouldn't give it to it again because we have the votes. They never thought their governor would veto it. Why? Because he was concerned with the misuse of the prescription.
Mr. Meyer, your answer to the same question, would you support the bill that passed last session?
My wife is an emergency room physician, and the challenges she has, the problems she deals with every day at work are some of the hardest life and death challenges anywhere in our state. The diversity of people and viewpoints that come in to her medical office, into the emergency room, as patients are as diverse as our state is. I think that the state and the state legislature should really have no role in determining what counsel a doctor gives to a patient. I think that's between the doctor, the patient, and their family. So unlike Governor Carney, I would sign the bill that the legislature passed. I think there are many people out there who I understand. There are serious religious concerns about the bill. I understand that. There are many people who would say, I would never do that. I believe they should have a right not to do it, just as people should have a right to exercise their right to die.
Since you mentioned, Governor Carney did mention in vetoing the medical aid in dying bill, his decision was in part based on his being, quote, fundamentally and morally opposed to state law enabling someone, even under tragic and painful circumstances, to take their own life. If you are elected, would your morality be part of the criteria you use when weighing the use of veto power? And kind of more largely speaking, what criteria would you use when deciding whether or not to veto legislation? We start with you, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think morality does matter. I agree with Governor Carney in that morality should play a part. We're electing leaders to make moral judgments about just about everything we've talked about: education, housing, environment, at some base level. You're talking about basic morality, our basic belief system. What do we care about? For me, it's about equity. It's about fairness. It's about liberty, about freedom. Everyone should have some freedom to make choices about their own bodies. I think that there should be steps taken by our state government to make sure that historic inequities are being addressed. And so if I see bills or ideas that come across my desk, proposals from departments across our government that conflict with those ethics, with those ideals, I will veto them or work to stop them. I think that's how our system should work. The alternative is, I guess, running a poll and saying, whatever the most popular thing is, that's what I'm going to do. I actually admire and respect Governor Carney for standing up and saying, hey, my morality is this, and if you don't agree with me, you won't support me on this one.
Mr. Ramone, your response, would morality play a part in your decision to make vetoes, and are there other criteria that you have in mind for what would move you to veto legislation?
I live in a district that is very opposite of my registration. And many people look at registration as a dictation of morality. I don't. What I look at is I still represent everybody in my district, whether they're Republicans, whether they're Democrats, whether they're Jewish, Catholic, Christian, whatever, Muslim. I represent people. I help people. My job as a governor isn't to exercise my morality. My job as a governor is to keep our community safe, keep our people in an environment where safety is always top. For someone whose wife is an emergency room doctor to suggest that, this death with dignity pill should be passed as it was written, I would assume they have very good knowledge of the ways that pill could be gotten, and that's horrifically scary that they feel that's okay. Governor Carney knew the problems with the bill, as did the sponsor, as did the Senate. They came to us after the bill was vetoed and asked, would you still vote for it if we modified it? We said, absolutely. But you're not allowed to amend a veto, so you have to vote for the bill as it was. We're supposed to be working for Delawareans. We're supposed to be making Delaware safe. Governor Carney did the right thing. And I do think the doctor should have the #1 responsibility of whether to prescribe the pill, but also administer its taking, not any Tom, Dick, and Harry. That's scary.
Mr. Meyer, he did address you, so I do want to give you.
He addressed my wife, actually. I don't think she's around to.
I'm going to give you 15 seconds to give your response quickly.
Listen, there's a fundamental disagreement here. I think that legislators generally should get out of the doctor's office. I think doctors have a wealth of knowledge. I mean, my wife is the boss of my house, and I think she also needs to be the boss when a patient comes to see her in the emergency room. That goes to the death with dignity, and it also goes with women's reproductive rights.
Okay, fair
Can I recount? Because
very quickly, because we got to
I would
move on.
just say one of the most important things of a governor is they actually understand what they're saying and what they're talking about. We both agree the doctor should have the ability to distribute. However, the bill doesn't do that. So know what the bill is before you say
You have made that point.
Got it.
We do want to talk a bit about working with the General Assembly. And for that, we'll turn to Delaware Public Media's political reporter, Sarah Petrowicz. Sarah.
Thank you, Tom. A cooperative relationship between the General Assembly and the governor is a necessity for any administration to make effective policy change. If elected, would your administration take a more active approach in setting an agenda and working with the General Assembly to accomplish those goals, or do you believe in a more reactive approach? And how do you plan to build rapport and strengthen your relationship with members of the General Assembly on either side of the aisle? Mr. Ramone, you'll take this one first.
I think it's clear there's 3 branches of government. And there's a reason for that. You've got your judicial branch. Sometimes you just need a judge. Unfortunately, this year, our General Assembly passed 5 bills within the last General Assembly, 2 years, that all went to a court, and all 5 were turned back over, using the taxpayers' money to do that. But that's why you have a legislative branch and a judicial branch. And an executive branch has a role in that. As you've seen our governor, they do have the ability to veto a bill. But you don't, as a executive branch governor, dictate what the legislative branch does. They run theirs. You respect the speaker. You respect your lieutenant governor, who, by the way, I know it's mentioned, is not voted on a ticket. It is each person voted individually in Delaware. But you put those people in place to be the voice of the people. It's the people's house. I'm there to listen to my constituents and then mix with all the other legislators to hear about their constituents and be problem resolution people. I get a little concerned when we moved from problem resolution into agenda attacking, when people are coming in with all these millions of dollars from 2 PACs that somehow somebody forgot about, but the money comes in and you have an expectation of behavior. That is wrong, and we don't need 435 bills coming out of a General Assembly. That's preposterous.
Thank you, Mr. Ramone. Same question to Mr. Meyer on rapport with the General Assembly.
The governor has a number of vitally important roles to our state. One of the most important that's not often talked about is the governor is effectively the CEO of the largest employer in the state, our state government. The governor also responds to legislation when it comes forward. And collaborates with legislators. But the most important thing I think the governor does is the governor leads. The governor collaborates with legislators, compromises where appropriate, compromises without sacrificing fundamental values, communicates and understands and listens to the over 1 million Delawareans and charts a path forward. So yeah, you're going to see agendas and policies come forward. We like to say we don't make promises, we make plans, and we turn those plans into progress. We do it collaboratively with the General Assembly, with the state Senate, but we don't do it in a way that sacrifices our values. Let me give an example. The Republicans in the House that Mr. Ramone has led the last 2 years have proposed that LLCs can vote. That's not something I'll compromise on. The Republicans that Mr. Ramone leads in the House have voted consistently voted against codifying Roe v. Wade, to say in Delaware, insofar as their states' rights, the Republicans say women should not have a right to choose. Republicans have also proposed dramatic tax cuts for the ultra wealthy. Those are things we will not compromise on.
Very quickly, Mr. Ramone, specifically just on what he said on your stance on abortion, can you address that?
Very, very briefly, LLCs can vote. In 17 municipalities, 1 more asked to do that, and we empower them. That doesn't mean we're saying they can or can't. We're saying they can vote on it. Just to give clarity, I thought my opponent knew a little bit more what the bill said. But the other is codifying Roe v. Wade. I voted to codify the bills in the House that are now the most aggressive addressing of women's rights ever in the state of a Republican, and against my party several times.
Senate Bill 5, Mr. Ramone voted against codifying Roe v. Wade.
Thank you, gentlemen. But staying along the same lines, this past legislative session, members of the General Assembly codified an executive order by Governor John Carney that requires the governor to consider benchmark appropriation and budget stabilization fund requirements when crafting their fiscal recommendations. Can you talk a little bit about, with the looming costs of healthcare and education, how do you specifically plan to fund those endeavors while keeping the budget in mind? We are going to start with you, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, that is a great challenge that we're going into a budget cycle where you have healthcare costs rising, there are increasing demands for funding in our education system. Where are the resources going to come from? The first is we need to take urgent action to reduce healthcare costs. We have a comprehensive plan that I encourage you to look at, and I encourage voters to review. When I came in as county executive, we had a similar crisis where our expenses far outstripped our revenues. We went line by line through the county budget, and we found about $5 million of abusive spending, of misappropriated spending that we put into savings for the taxpayer. We're going to do the same at the state level. We've also been very open that as a matter of morality and ethics, we think it's wrong that if a Delaware family makes $70,000 a year, they pay the same tax rate as a state tax rate as a Delaware family making $70 million a year. That's not right. And we're going to look at, insofar as we need to raise revenue, we're going to look at the ultra wealthy. Now, you can contrast that to my opponent who's proposing a tax reduction for those same ultra wealthy families.
Mr. Ramone, your response.
So clearly, you need a problem solver to solve problems. You can talk about stuff, you can embellish things. You got to make sure you're not bought and paid for. You need to make sure you're representing the people in the state. In Delaware, when we had the crisis, when we switched governors, I was on the committee with the JFC with Melanie George Smith, and we did a line item audit. We went through one line at a time with 12 other people, but only 4 of us on this committee, and we saved $150 million. That's the kind of numbers you're talking in the state. Not 5 million. There's a big difference in understanding the mechanism of what you're doing and how big you need to handle this budget and how much you don't know, but you're writing a 100-page book on how you're going to solve problems. What I would suggest is really simple. We need to create an environment that we are fiscally responsible in solving problems simultaneously. I'll give you an example. We have the biggest growing senior population, maybe even more than Florida after the storms, and we have no health care. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough anything in those fields. So we've been talking about this partnership with Jefferson. Delaware needs its own medical school, its own medical school hospital. It doesn't have to be one of our 3 hospitals, and it doesn't even have to be one of our schools, but it could be a relationship with several. But you bring them all to the table, you talk about the problem, you get the solution, and guess what happens? We start building our own farm of people staying and working.
Thank you, Mr.
I think you read the op-ed that I wrote 2 years ago.
Okay, well, listen, here's what we're going to do, because we have limited time left, and we want to hit as many issues as we can. So from here on out, I'm asking you to limit your answers to 1 minute, the rest of the way. So let's start with...
And talk fast.
Rapid fire.
Or that, if you choose to do so. In June 2023, lawmakers passed a series of changes to Delaware's Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, or LEABO, first changes in decades. It was a compromise bill. If elected, would you support revisiting LEABO to seek further changes? If so, are there areas you feel that need to be addressed? If not, why not? Mr. Ramone, we start with you, 1 minute.
I think there's nothing more important in Delaware than the safety of our officers and their ability to enhance the safety of our citizens. I think before I do anything, I believe we wrote a great bill. I believe we had a lot of compromise. And quite frankly, I think the first thing we need to do is we get our police force back up to 100%. Both the county police force and the state police force are both seriously depleted. We need to get them the amount of people that they need to do their jobs before we hold expectations that are difficult for them to implement. We do need training, we do need support, we do need to help our police, and we do need to constantly be reconfiguring how we're doing things and how we can do them better, safer, and more customer friendly to the people of the state. I would suggest very simply, the police and the governor need to be able to work together as a team. I think I have the ability to do that, getting endorsements from just about every single police force. I think it's an important role.
Mr. Meyer, your answer on LEABO, 1 minute.
Yeah, one of the most important things government does is provides public safety. By changes we made to the county police, the second largest police agency in the state of Delaware, gun violence is down in areas policed by the Newcastle County Police, 44%. By nearly a half. We incorporated mental health and substance use into our policing like never before. We incorporated police transparency, started one of the first police accountability boards of any police agency in the state of Delaware. As our communities change, policing needs to change, and that includes increased accountability. I appreciate the amendments to LEABO that were made. We're going to continue monitoring them and making sure that we're doing everything to keep communities safe, to keep officers safe, but also to make sure officers, particularly those acting outside the law, are being held accountable not by other police officers, but by the public at large.
Quickly, we're going to turn to Sarah Petchwich for another question.
Thank you. As you mentioned, Delaware's aging population is increasing, and reports of alleged abuse and mistreatment in long-term care facilities increased by 51% in 2023, along with a 75% increase in individuals placed on the adult abuse registry in just 2 years. How do you plan to support Delaware's aging population being cared for in assisted living facilities, as well as attracting high-quality healthcare workers to this niche field of care? Mr. Meyer, you're first.
Yeah, thank you for that. One element of a developed, advanced society is how people age. I spent time in Iraq in wartime, and one thing that is implanted in my brain and in my heart is seeing people age there uncared for, often on the streets. We need to make sure that at a time when Social Security is less solvent than ever, the challenges of attracting a workforce to work at senior care facilities is harder than ever, that we continue to allow people like my own 2 parents to age with dignity and with support. We will prioritize not only making sure that private health insurance is funding programs like this, but make sure our friends, our relatives, our neighbors who are on Medicaid, the least vulnerable among us, can truly get the highest quality services in their golden years, and also where opportunities are available to contribute back.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. You have 1 minute, Mr. Ramone.
Very quickly, I think, you've got to do what you say and say what you do. When you are talking about trying to have seniors age in place, but you vote yourself a pay raise and you had the highest tax increase over the last 8 years, I think there's a problem. I think 20% more than you made before.
You never voted for a pay raise.
Tell
me what's stay on topic, please. Stay on topic. Aging population.
The point is very simple. They need to be able to age in place. And if you keep putting pressure on the taxes to keep going up in the county, they can't do that. That's why I proposed 3 times in a row that we have a bill for our seniors that enables, as they reach to a certain age, which is about 65, maybe 70, we have to do the math, their property tax freeze, because my mom and dad, who are 88 and 89, are not going to be able to stay in their house in Newcastle County because of the incredible increases. I don't know if all of the reappraisals have gone out yet. I've heard we delayed that till probably after the election, but I do think it's going to be difficult on seniors to age in place when you don't do that, and the medical school will bring in the staff.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, we're going to do our final question right now, and it's about gun safety laws. I wanted to note a Delaware Journalism Collaborative poll that found 62% of Delawareans somewhat or strongly favor creating more laws that regulate gun ownership. The most recent action by the General Assembly on this was passing permit for purchase this year. That's currently being challenged in federal court. Mr. Ramone, you voted against permit to purchase, but are there gun safety measures you would, as governor, consider? Yeah. 1 minute.
Yes, very quickly. I voted against permit to purchase because it's unconstitutional. It's currently in court. They're going to figure that out. I've done that 5 times on bills that some people think are very popular that we should be putting our names on, but I'm not going to put my name on a bill that violates the Constitution. However, I am very proud that I checked this before tonight, that I have the most gun safety favorable voting record in my entire caucus in our House, and better than many of the Democrats. And I'm proud of that because I don't feel that I'm bought or paid by anyone. I don't have anybody giving me tons of money to vote a certain way. I do what's best for Delaware. And if it's a smart gun bill, vote for it. I'm not a big hunter. I've actually never shot an animal, just kind of learned a little bit about guns. But again, as you said a minute ago, it's not about me. It's about people having the freedom and the flexibility to do what they can do in a safe state that they control, not me as a governor.
Mr. Meyer, what gun safety measures, if any, would you pursue as governor?
11 years ago, I stood on the corner of 4th and Washington Street in Wilmington as one of my students, at a vigil one evening, as one of my students crumbled next to his mother because his father had been shot in the basement days before by a handgun. While I was there teaching, trying to support students, not just this one, but many whose lives were devastated by gun violence, Mr. Ramone has been taking money from the NRA. We need to prioritize people. We need to prioritize making sure everyone is safe. In an advanced society, we don't have weapons of war that can be brought to school. I will do everything within my power to keep our children safe, and that includes additional gun regulation.
All right. That concludes our time available for questions. So I do want to give both of you a chance to offer voters your concluding thoughts, both limited to 60 seconds. We will start with Newcastle County Executive Matt Meyer. Your closing statement, 1 minute.
Thank you so much again to Delaware Public Media, University of Delaware, Delaware Debates. Mr. Begleiter, I think, founded these forums. My name is Matt Meyer. I'm a Delaware kid. 14 years ago, I had the opportunity of a lifetime to go to Iraq, spend 12 months there as a diplomat, embedded during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation New Dawn. I came home and I found my passion after starting a couple small businesses, not in business. I didn't find my passion as a diplomat or even in politics. I found my passion as a 6th and 7th grade math teacher. But the more I taught, the more I became a pissed off math teacher, because I found that politicians would come to my school, give speeches, and the solutions never came to fruition. The situation was getting worse, but not better. For the last 8 years, we've led a bold, innovative government that's led our county forward like never before. We can do that at our state, too. November 5th, make sure to get out and vote. Matt Meyer, the Meyer administration will lead this state forward like never before.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Now, State Representative Mike Ramone, your closing statement, 60 seconds.
Thank you. I think it's very clear delineation here of what you've got. You know, you have an opportunity to have a superpower party run our state like they have for 32 years, or you have an opportunity to have a bipartisan, level-headed, 16-year state legislator who went from bond to JFC, to leadership, that has the experience and knows how the government works, especially the state government, not just the county, doesn't have any polarization from county to county, doesn't have any polarizations with unions, non-unions, police, fire, paramedics, can work with people, isn't angry, isn't coming in with running at all costs campaigns, no matter what you do to other people in their thing. I am here to help the state. I am really looking forward to be the first governor in memory that's coming into Dover in an environment of being a bipartisan initiative to help Delaware be a better place to live for my children, grandchildren, and family.
Mr. Meyer, Mr. Ramone, thank you both for participating in Delaware Debates 2024. On behalf of Delaware Public Media and University of Delaware Center for Political Communication, thank you all for watching Delaware Debates. I'm Tom Byrne, encouraging you to cast your vote by Tuesday, November 5th. Thank you for joining us.